Hi, this is Eric again with another game design exercise. And today it is rock, paper, scissors. This is an exercise that comes from the rules we break. This exercise is all about physical and social play. We're going to go through several mods of the classic game rock, paper, scissors. I love using this exercise on the very first day of a class or a workshop. It gets everyone out of their seats and active. Okay, let's take a look at what's going to happen in this workshop, what we learned. So the first thing is a little bit about the design process, what it means to modify and play with an existing game mechanic. Also going to look at how people play with each other, and also a little bit about playing with meaning. This exercise needs about 6 or more players, but it works with really big groups. I've done it with 40, 50, 60 people all at once, so it really scales well. About 45 minutes is what you need. You also need a space where you're going to get everyone standing up and spread out, so that could be outdoors if the weather is nice, or some kind of large room. Let's take a look at the steps of this exercise. So as usual, I am going to take us one by one through these steps, and as you can see, most of them are basically successively modding and changing the basic game of rock, paper, scissors, usually with a bit of discussion each time we do it. All right, so let's get started with the basic game. Now, what I like to do at the very beginning is ask people, what is rock, paper, scissors in their native language? It's a surprisingly global game, and this is a way to get people interacting a little bit, and you can ask them to say what are the names of the symbols or what do they call the game in their language, and you can embarrass yourself if you want trying to pronounce it in a different language. Okay, once we're sort of there, you can ask people for 2 volunteers to play the basic game. So everyone should be standing in a big circle and call the 2 volunteers in the middle. And these 2 volunteers are going to play rock, paper, scissors with each other. But before they can start, of course, we have to establish the all-important timing rule. Is it 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, go, or shoot, rock, paper, scissors, shoot, whatever it is. Let the group decide, discuss it with everybody. Once you've determined, count them off, 1, 2, 3, go, or whatever it was that you decided on, and see who won, or if it's a tie, of course, and play it again. Do the best 2 out of 3. This is just to establish the basic game and to give everyone kind of a common touchstone for everything that's going to follow. But even at this early stage, there's actually a lot to talk about. So pause a little bit to discuss here. I always like to begin talking about rock, paper, scissors by asking, is it a good game? In other words, would we say that rock, paper, scissors is actually a good game? And I don't know what the answer is, but people will probably have strong opinions, right? Some people might say, well, actually, it's not that bad because it's well balanced, and every symbol is balanced by every other symbol. It's very quick and efficient, and it's very accessible, right? These are all really good points. So yes, in some ways, it is a good game. Hopefully, you've got some disagreement there. There could be people that say, look, there's nothing to this game. It's totally random. It doesn't mean anything. It's kind of like a disposable game. And it's horrible to play. And you would never just play this on its own for fun. Other people might have a different point of view. Maybe it's like a tool for deciding things. So it's actually interesting because it's a game that has a sort of utility maybe outside of the game. But it's really interesting to sort of begin by discussing, is it a good game? Another interesting point to bring up is, can we talk about this game as a design? In other words, rock, paper, scissors is a folk game. There's not one single person or team or company that designed it, but that doesn't mean that we can't talk about it, right? In the 20th century, or really starting a little bit earlier, but mostly in the 20th century, games underwent this huge shift from being mostly folk games to being much more authored media. right? And so even though rock, paper, scissors belongs to that earlier category of traditional folk games, there's still a lot going on there, and that doesn't mean that we can't talk about it as a kind of activity or system or interaction that has its own kind of design. And one of the things I'd like to highlight about the design of rock, paper, scissors is the way that it plays with meaning. As always, it's hard to write and talk at the same time. So how is it that rock, paper, scissors plays with meaning, right? Well, there's, we have these, we have the symbols, rock and scissors and paper, right? And so each of them have their own sort of symbol or iconography, right? So if you saw me walking down the street and you saw me shaking my fist, you might say, what's wrong with that person? Why is he so angry, right? Or maybe I'm at a sports event and I'm saying, yay, go team, right? Or maybe I don't know what I'm doing, play fighting with a friend, so I'm doing a sort of an exaggerated theatrical slow motion punch, right? There's lots of reasons why I could have my hand in a fist, but in rock, paper, scissors, we give this symbol a meaning. We give this kind of gesture a meaning, right? Of course, we have other gestures too. We have the scissors and we have the paper. And beyond their kind of iconographic meaning, right? The fact that maybe a closed fist looks a little bit like a rock, they have their logical meaning too. I mean, the fact that rock beats scissors and scissors beats paper and paper beats rock, the symbols become a kind of little language. And just like in a language where if you looked up one word in the dictionary, you could look up all of the other words in the dictionary to kind of figure out how those words all are meant to function. Rock, paper, scissors is sort of a set of little definitions that all kind of support each other and interact with each other, defined by the relationship with the others. And this is one way of understanding what game designers do. They create situations where players engage in meaning. And players explore and play with and create meaning both within and sometimes pushing against the constraints of the system. And that's one way of understanding what rock, paper, scissors is. So just to say, there's a lot to talk about, even in the very basic game of rock, paper, scissors. And what's going on there. But let's get back to the exercise. And after you've had a little bit of discussion, maybe make sure and thank your volunteers for stepping into the center. It's time for the very first variation, team variation. So take your circle of people and divide them in half, right? So half are on one team and half are on the other team. And this is how it's going to work. Each team is going to go back a little bit and sort of huddle. And they are going to decide as a group which of the three symbols they want to use. And then they're going to select from within their group a champion or avatar representative that's going to come out and then face off against each other. So divide them into teams of about equal size, 2 teams of about equal size, and let them huddle and just talk for a bit. Now, this actually is really important. Let them talk for as long as they want. They might be a few minutes, it might be 5 minutes, it might be 10 minutes. You'll find surprisingly that there is a lot to talk about. But let them take the time that they want. Then they're going to select their representative. They're going to come out and face off. Before you have them actually do the rock, paper, scissors with each other, point out to them that this game that just a few minutes ago, many of them were saying was totally trivial or random, there was a debate about whether it was a good game or not, that they actually were spending a lot of time talking about it. Point that out and then let them fight. So, or let them have the round. So on the count of 1, 2, or 3, let them go and see what happens. It might be a tie. It might be one of them wins. Take note of the emotional reactions of the crowd. Probably you're going to get some cheering or maybe some gasps or maybe some cries of disappointment. But again, another thing to take notice of. Part of being a designer, and you can let them know this is that we want to not just play games, but we want to observe the game's effects on people. So learning how to listen and observe people's emotional responses is also part of what we want to pay attention to here. And definitely when we've changed from 2 players to teams, suddenly there's a different kind of investment in the outcome that expresses itself as a crowd reaction. Okay, so let them do this 2 or 3 rounds. After a round or 2, I actually like to change it up a little bit. So maybe for their last round, you can ask them, what's a way that we could change or modify what you're doing, this rock, paper, scissors face-off, to make it a little bit more theatrical? So without changing the logic of the game, maybe, for example, they stand back to back and do it sort of high noon cowboy duel style, spinning around at the last minute. Figure out if there's a way, get suggestions from the crowd, try out an idea or 2. Can you make rock, paper, scissors a little bit more theatrical? And then to round out this first mod of teams, discuss it a little bit, right? So one thing to start talking about is what happened? What happened in this shift from having just 2 players to suddenly having, 2 whole teams of players? Well, one way of understanding what happens with a game is that games have choices. So that games offer players a choice. In this case, the main choice of rock, paper, scissors is which symbol you want to have, right? The choice has an outcome based on what your opponent or partner did. And that is a sort of the core of the game. But what we did when we shifted from the kind of quick, let's say more disposable feeling game of just one person versus another person to having it team versus team is that we really took this moment of choice and we really stretched it out, right? We stretched it out over space and over time and over a social situation so that there's all of a sudden a whole bunch of discussion about what we should do based on what we think the other team is doing. We also started to theatricalize the outcome, right? We pick a representative. That representative comes out. They face off. Maybe you even did some of the more theatrical ways for them to reveal the choice that they made. So we're taking this simple moment of choice and outcome and we're really stretching it out, right? And as we stretch it out, it becomes more encrusted with meaning, layers of social meaning, layers of theatrical meaning, and the proof is in the pudding, right? The proof is in the engagement and the emotional reactions that people had. So for me, this is a really interesting way of taking what could otherwise be a really trivial game and just by creating teams, creating more meaning and adding meaning to the experience. So, all right, let's move on to the next mod, which is PPP. Okay, what does that mean? PPP, what could that possibly mean? Well, that PPP stands for Panther, Person, and Porcupine. And this is a variation of rock, paper, scissors that will not... Okay. Wow, all right, well, it still works. So this is a variation of rock, paper, scissors, panther, person, and porcupine that doesn't change the core logic of the game, but does kind of reskin it and gives it new, let's say, content, right? So first, establish with everybody what beats what here. So panther beats person. I guess that should make sense to everyone. Panthers are these terrifying predators that could easily dispatch with a human being. Person beats porcupine, and you can just think about the sort of sensible footwear that you might be wearing that would render the porcupine's quills ineffective. So person can beat porcupine, and then porcupine beats panther. And it's all about that soft belly of the panther and the quills poking up and getting the panther. So panther beats person beats porcupine. Okay, we've established the basic logic of the game, but the one thing you need to establish with the participants is the symbols, right? So we're going to replace the symbols of rock, paper, scissors with these 3 symbols. And this is where you want to start getting suggestions. So ask people, what can we do for panther, right? So they may say, okay, a hand with a claw, but let's make it a full body. Don't just make it the hand, make it your whole body. So maybe you're crouching down and add a noise to it. So all of these need to be a gesture and a sound. So maybe it's a or a wow or a whatever you think or whatever the group thinks is the best panther sound. And then go ahead and do porcupine and do person and get suggestions, have everybody practice all 3 of them and make sure everybody is comfortable doing panther, person, and porcupine. Okay, so you might be thinking to yourself, this sounds a little bit silly. And yes, it is a little bit silly. That is actually part of the exercise. Being able to be silly is actually really important. For me, being loose and free in our bodies, being comfortable with each other is part of being creative. And it's part of what we are practicing in this exercise, rock, paper, scissors, plus, at this moment. My sense is that if you can't be a little bit loose and silly and maybe vulnerable here playing a game, then how are you going to share ideas in a group, right? When you're brainstorming or give and receiving criticism with others, right? So practicing being silly means practicing being a little bit unself-conscious and able to be sort of loose and creative. As you are working with a group to figure out panther, person, and porcupine, lead by example. Be silly yourself, right? Laugh at yourself. But then recognize when others are doing a great job of suggesting a gesture or doing a particularly dramatic version too. Okay, so you've established panther, person, porcupine, PPP, and then it's time to play. Let the groups go back and huddle with each other and have each of them pick a symbol. Now this time, instead of sending out a single champion, we're gonna do something else. We are gonna have both groups line up entirely next to each other in the middle of wherever you're playing. Everyone is gonna do the symbol at once. So everyone needs to know what the symbol is. And on the count of 1, 2, and 3, everybody does the symbol with each other. So this gets everybody involved, everybody doing the silly gesture with each other. Do that once or twice, and then you can move right on to the final variation, which is going to build on everything that we did before, but it is tag. And this version of the game, rock, paper, scissors, tag, or panther, person, porcupine tag, is a little bit more physical. So I do want to pause for a moment and just talk about this idea of participation. So getting participation from an audience or from participants in an exercise like this, it's tricky and it's something that you want to be aware of. Now, if you think back in this exercise, one of the ways that I've tried to engender participation is through small steps. So that is always a good strategy for engendering participation. For example, remember that we started with just people sharing what rock, paper, scissors was in their language. So this kind of helps them be seen. It gives people sort of a voice that might be not in the kind of dominant language culture that's in the group that you have. And the next step was having just 2 participants here. So again, not everybody has to volunteer, but you ask for a couple people. When we went to teams, there was a very easy way to participate, which was you could even be a little bit more passive. You can join in the discussion, but you don't necessarily have to be one of the 2 people here. And then we're ramping it up as we go through the steps of the exercise as people are starting to get sillier through panther, person, porcupine. And now we're in actually more physical game. So small steps is one way to kind of get people slowly engaged and fully participating in the exercise, which more or less is what you want. At the same time though, while it's great to have everybody participating, it's also okay not to participate. So it's okay not to play. And this is a really important concept, and Bernie DeKoven, from whom a lot of these exercises come, felt so important he felt it was so important, this idea of not having to play, that often in a situation like this where we're all playing physical games, he would have everybody practice not playing together, right? If you're being forced to play, it's not play, it's something else. It's some kind of like, I don't know, labor camp or it's work, right? So you want a spirit of free volunteer participation and not everybody feeling like they absolutely have to play. So not playing is totally fine, and tell people that. Give them permission. Let everybody know that they absolutely don't have to play. Maybe you will explain how the game works, and then they can decide if they want to play. Another approach is to give people special roles. So if people don't want to play, they can maybe be official participants in the game. So, official spectators, right? Still participants, but looking from the outside. And in fact, if you have people that are referees or spectators, you should go to them first when it comes time to discuss the game, because they have special eyes looking from outside the game, and they might have some insight that other folks don't have. So giving people special roles is a good strategy. And of course, another strategy is that you can always change the game. For example, when I was learning my first rock, paper, scissors plus with Bernie DeKoven, who I mentioned, we decided for the tag version, we didn't want to run because it was on asphalt and not grass. So instead of running totally freely, we ran but with our knees touching like this. So we could only take little baby steps. And we changed the game to make everyone feel more comfortable and for it to be more inclusive. So it's totally fine to do any of these things to engender participation, to make people feel comfortable, and just for you running the exercise to be aware that of people's levels of comfort and physical differences, and what can you do to help everyone be involved in the process as much as they want to be. Okay, so let's get back to the game itself. We are playing rock, paper, scissors tag, or panther, person, porcupine tag. So the first thing you want to do is clear the space of any obstacles so people won't trip over them. And you want to establish on either end of somewhere on the play field, I'm just drawing dotted lines here, but some sort of safe zones, not too far, maybe even just several steps away, that you can use as the place where people need to go. Here's how the game works. The teams are going to huddle up, and each of them is going to select a symbol, not rock, paper, scissors, but panther, person, or porcupine. And then they're going to line up nose to nose as close as you can get them right in the center of the play field. On the count of 1, 2, 3, go, or whatever you've decided, everyone is going to reveal their symbol. Now, a few things can happen. If one team beats the other team, for example, if panther beats person, so if this is panther and this is person, the person people want to turn around and run as quickly as they can towards the safe zone. But anybody that gets tagged by someone on the team that beat them is going to join their team. So it's not one-to-one person. Anyone on this team can tag anybody on the other team. It's sort of every person for themselves at that point, trying to run away. Of course, if the situation is reversed, this team beats that one, they're going to turn around and try and run for the safe zone. If it's a tie, well then the traditional rock, paper, scissors tag thing to do is to hug it out. People might be more comfortable with a handshake or elbow bump, depending on your situation, but let people give a nice friendly gesture to each other. Okay, once you've explained it, made sure people don't have questions, made sure people are participating that want to participate. You have spectators posted where they can get a good look at the action. Stand in the middle or just outside the middle and give the count off, 1, 2, 3, go. And then stand back, and it's going to be a little bit furious for a moment. It's going to be a little bit chaotic and fun. But what will happen, unless there's a tie, if there's a tie, do it again. But one team will have won, right? So one team will probably have captured some folks on the other team, and the next time you line up, it might be quite unequal in terms of what happens. The official way to play rock, paper, scissors tag is that you play until there's nobody left, right? It's interesting, sort of cooperative model. Everyone ends up on the same team. But in this case, you may not have time for that, and it's okay to just play a few rounds. After that, it's plenty of fodder and fuel for discussion. And it's time to move on to the final step of the exercise for the final discussion. So what are some things that you might talk about with rock, paper, scissors plus the tag variation? So first, ask people about what they just experienced in this tag variation. What are some observations that anyone wants to make? Some folks might talk about how there was a lot of confusion, right? I mean, that is definitely something that is interesting about this design. Usually in games, and usually in most forms of design, we think about clarity, right? We want an interface to be perfectly clear. We want players to know about the state of the game, for example. But in this case, actually, the chaos of trying to figure out this panther, person, porcupine, what symbol did I do, what did they do, what beats what, that moment of ambiguity is actually really fun, and it lends itself to the sort of chaotic, wild energy of the game. What else happened? So you could talk about maybe the social aspects of play. For example, how did it feel when you were on one team and you went to the other team, right? Did you feel like you were sort of a traitor or, sort of betraying the people that you had been working with so far? Or maybe you felt like an interesting spy, or I don't know, maybe something else happened there. So you can have people talk about the way that this new version changes from the more fixed set of the social setup of just teams that aren't going to change, right? Of course, there's lots of theatrical things that you can talk about as well. I mean, there's even like a kind of a narrative that starts to come out of the game when you have, for example, the kind of the ragtag bunch of holdouts against the encroaching horde, that's threatening to sort of overwhelm them on the field when you have an uneven number like this. So there's definitely a lot that's happening there. Another thing you can talk about in the final discussion is creative play. So this maybe happened all throughout all of these variations, not just the funny symbols that you made, but, at what point did people want to start maybe eavesdropping or cheating a little bit to try and figure out what the other team was going to do? I think that I've seen some amazing examples of creative play in this game. I once had this kind of situation where there was a small team against a big team, and they decided that they were going to run away no matter what the other team did. So they actually ran after they had actually beat the team symbol-wise, and we decided that everyone that had been tagged actually had captured those people on the team, and then it was reversed, of course. So there was some really interesting creative strategic play, let's say bending, breaking, modding the rules, and we want to celebrate that, and we want to recognize that within the constraints of a game, we don't just play in the rules, but we play with the rules too. Maybe a final part of a discussion can talk about what is modding, right? So one of the interesting things that we've done here is we keep on changing the game as we've moved through these variations. And interestingly, we never really changed too much the core atom of the game. We never really changed this logic. Now, we did add a few rules about capturing to the tag variation, but most of these were, let's say, things that did not encroach upon the core mechanic of the game, dividing people into teams, reskinning it as panther, person, and porcupine, maybe adding an extra kind of outcome to the normal outcome where you could tag someone that you had beaten within this core logic. So normally in modding a game, we think, to change a game, we have to change the rules and make a kind of a radical difference to the game. But rock, paper, scissors plus shows us that we can actually make what would normally be thought of as perhaps more superficial changes, but they can have an incredibly deep and profound change to the experience of the game, to the meaning of the game, right? The human experience of the game. Just like the way when we added teams, we stretched out that choice and it became sort of wonderfully encrusted with meaning. All right, we're getting near the end of the exercise. I think the last thing that I want to say about this is that this exercise, rock, paper, scissors plus, works incredibly well online as a remote activity. You can go through almost all of these steps the normal way that you might. Having two teams, maybe they go into breakout rooms, they pick a symbol, their champions face off. For the third variation, you can't really do tag in a remote video situation. So then you can turn it into a design problem and say, hey, what is a version of rock, paper, scissors that we could all play together? So that would be a way to do rock, paper, scissors plus online. I think that is just about everything that I wanted to say about this exercise. As always, rock, paper, scissors comes from the rules we break. And if you get the book, you can see that it includes nice illustrations by the designer Benjamin English, as well as tips for how to run the exercise and frame the discussion. So feel free to check that out. And I also want to tell you, as always, if you do manage to run the exercise rock, paper, scissors plus, I would love to hear about it and hear about how you think it could be improved. Thanks so much.